Why was everyone laughing at her? The California sun burned bright over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado that morning, turning concrete into griddles and steel too hot to touch. The precision marksmanship range stretched out like a runway, target stations dotting the landscape at measured intervals. 100 yards, 300, 500, 800, and the infamous 1,000-yard line where only the most elite shooters dared attempt their craft. 40 Navy SEALs stood gathered there, warriors, operators, men who had earned their positions through blood and capabilities that defied normal human limitations, men who knew what excellence looked like. And they were all staring at her. Meadow Sterling didn't look like excellence. She looked exactly like what Staff Sergeant Knox Blackwood said she looked like, a daycare worker with a toy gun, someone playing soldier. "Look what the Navy dragged in, boys." Knox's voice boomed across the range like a war horn. His massive 6'4" frame cast a shadow over the equipment tables, his desert camouflage stretched tight across shoulders built for breaking things. He gestured mockingly toward the petite blonde woman methodically unpacking a rifle case at Station 7. "I bet she's here to teach us how to finger paint targets." The laughter erupted, cruel, cutting, 40 voices echoing off concrete barriers like wolves circling fresh prey. Meadow didn't flinch. Her blonde curls escaped from that messy high bun, catching the breeze as she continued her setup with mechanical precision. Gray civilian contractor shirt, dark military pants, brown combat boots. She looked exactly like what Knox claimed, someone playing dress-up in their father's closet. "Ma'am, you sure you're in the right place?" Lieutenant Cade Pierce shouted from the observation deck, pointing dramatically toward the base exit. "The Girl Scout cookie booth is about 10 miles that way." More laughter. Someone whistled. A paper airplane sailed past her head. But as Meadow reached for her scope case, her gray shirt pulled tight across her right arm for just a moment, just long enough to reveal the hint of something dark beneath the fabric, intricate black scales that seemed to move in the shifting shadows. No one noticed. They were too busy laughing. She straightened slowly, turned to face the crowd, and spoke for the first time. Her voice carried clearly across the range, calm as still water. "Before we begin, I have one question." The laughter died. "How many of you have actually made a confirmed kill at 1,500 yards?" Complete silence, sudden, suffocating. "That's what I thought," she smiled, not friendly, not warm, predatory. "Now let me teach you how to really shoot." Knox Blackwood owned this space the way apex predators own their territory. At 240 pounds of pure intimidation, wrapped in desert camouflage, he had built his reputation on breaking the weak and forging the strong. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. When he spotted the petite blonde woman setting up at the instructor's station, his reaction was immediate and visceral. "What fresh nonsense is this?" he muttered to Master Chief Diego Rivera, a grizzled veteran whose scarred hands told stories of 23 years in special operations. Rivera just shrugged, checking his watch with practiced indifference. Orders came down from the Pentagon. Some new initiative about civilian contractor integration. We sit through 2 hours of whatever this lady has to say, then we get back to real training. Knox's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Real training, Chief. I've got operators who can put 3 rounds through a quarter at 500 yards in crosswinds. What's this civilian going to teach us? How to shoot squirrels in her backyard?" The conversation carried, as Knox intended it to. Soon, the assembled SEALs were sizing up their supposed instructor with undisguised skepticism. These were men accustomed to perfection, warriors who had earned their positions through capabilities that defied normal human limitations. Lieutenant Pierce, a lean Texan with a perpetual smirk, started the commentary. "Think she's ever even seen a real rifle? That little pop gun she's got there looks like something my daughter would use at summer camp." Petty Officer Santos, usually the quiet observer, found himself drawn into the mockery. Maybe she's here to teach us about gun safety. You know, always point the barrel in a safe direction, and all that basic stuff we learned in boot camp. The laughter built gradually, feeding on itself like wildfire consuming dry brush. Each comment grew more cutting, more personal, more designed to wound. Casey Walsh, one of only 3 women in the SEAL community, watched from the back with growing discomfort. She recognized the dynamic all too well, the immediate dismissal based on appearance, the assumption that competence correlated with size and aggression. But even Casey found herself questioning what this civilian instructor could possibly offer to operators who trained at levels most people couldn't comprehend. Meadow continued her setup, seemingly oblivious to the growing commentary. Her movements were methodical, precise, almost ritualistic. She checked her scope mounts 3 times, running her fingers along the rail system with the kind of attention most people reserved for defusing bombs. When she attached the bipod, each click of the mechanism was audible in the morning air, sharp and final like a closing vault. "Look at her taking her sweet time," Knox called out, his voice carrying the authority of command. "We've got a full training schedule today, lady. Some of us have real missions to prepare for." Meadow glanced up briefly, her blue eyes meeting his for just a moment. Those eyes held something that made Rivera's instincts prickle with recognition, the kind of stillness that came before sudden decisive action. "Precision takes time, Sergeant. Rushing gets people killed." The response drew more laughter, but it was different now, edged with genuine contempt. Knox stepped closer, his bulk casting her in shadow like a mountain blocking the sun. "Killed?" He practically spat the word. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you look like you'd faint at the sound of a firecracker. When exactly did you serve in combat?" "I didn't say I served in combat," Meadow replied calmly, returning her attention to her rifle. The weapon itself was civilian legal, but clearly high-end. A precision bolt-action rifle with modifications that spoke of serious intent rather than weekend hobby shooting. "I said rushing gets people killed. That's true whether you're crossing a street or crossing a kill zone." Lieutenant Pierce jumped in from the observation deck, his voice dripping with theatrical disbelief. "Kill zone? Holy cow, she's using operator terminology now. Did you learn that from watching movies, sweetheart?" The sweetheart hung in the air like a challenge. Even the enlisted men shifted uncomfortably. There were lines you didn't cross, even in the military's rough-and-tumble culture. But Meadow didn't react. She simply continued her preparation, checking her ammunition with the same methodical care she'd shown everything else. Master Chief Rivera found himself studying her more carefully. 27 years in Marine Force recon had taught him to recognize certain movements, certain habits that spoke of extensive training under pressure. The way she handled her equipment, the unconscious scanning of the environment, the precise placement of every item within easy reach. These weren't the actions of someone playing soldier. "You know what I think," Knox announced to the crowd, playing to his audience like a comedian working a room. "I think someone in Washington decided we needed sensitivity training disguised as marksmanship instruction. Pretty soon they'll be sending us flower arrangers to teach us about battlefield aesthetics." The laughter was ugly now, meant to wound and humiliate. But as the sound died down, Meadow stood and walked to the center of the range. Her boots crunched on gravel. The wind caught her hair. She looked small against the vast expanse of targets and empty space. She turned to face them all. "I understand your skepticism," she said quietly. "I would be skeptical too. A civilian contractor, no visible combat experience, no intimidating presence, no credentials hanging on my wall." Knox crossed his arms, victorious. "But there's something you should know before we continue." Her voice dropped lower, almost conversational. I don't have credentials hanging on my wall because the missions I worked on don't officially exist. The kills I made were never recorded in any government database, and the people I protected will never know my name. The smiles began to fade. So let me ask you again. How many of you have made a confirmed kill at 1,500 yards? Silence. That's what I thought. She turned toward the range. Let's begin. What was she hiding beneath that shirt? The morning heat intensified as Meadow moved to the firing line. The kind of heat that made you question every decision that brought you to this moment. But she moved through it like she didn't feel it at all. Knox watched her with narrowed eyes. Something in her demeanor had shifted. The meek civilian contractor was gone. What remained was something harder, something that didn't match the blonde curls and petite frame. Station 1, she announced, settling behind her rifle with fluid grace. 800 yards, wind from the northwest at approximately 12 miles per hour, target acquisition in 5 seconds. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Her body settled into the weapon like water finding its level. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes focused downrange with the kind of intensity that seemed to bend reality itself. The shot broke clean, a single crack that echoed across the range. 800 yards away, the target shattered. Perfect center mass. A few SEALs exchanged glances. Lucky shot, their expressions said. Anyone could get lucky once. Station 2, Meadow said quietly, already chambering another round. 1,000 yards, crosswind increasing, moving target, 3 seconds. This time several operators moved closer, watching, calculating, waiting for the failure that would confirm their assumptions. The rifle spoke again. The moving target, barely visible at that distance, took the round dead center. No hesitation, no second guess, just mechanical perfection. Knox's jaw tightened. Interesting, he said, his voice carefully neutral. But 2 shots don't make an instructor, ma'am. Any decent shooter can get lucky twice. Meadow stood slowly. She walked to the equipment table, picked up a different rifle. This one was heavier, military grade, the kind of weapon that required strength just to shoulder properly. "You're right, Sergeant," she said, "so let's make it interesting." She gestured to the range. 12 targets, distances from 500 to 1,500 yards, mixed conditions, some stationary, some moving, some partially obscured. I'll engage all 12 in under 2 minutes. Lieutenant Pierce laughed outright. "Ma'am, with all due respect, our best shooters need at least 3 minutes for that course, and they're using optimized equipment and—" "I know what your best shooters need," Meadow interrupted quietly. "I designed the qualification course you're thinking of, the one you failed twice before passing on your 3rd attempt." Pierce's face went red. That information wasn't public knowledge, wasn't supposed to be accessible to civilian contractors. Who was this woman? Meadow moved to the firing line. But this time, before she settled into position, she did something unexpected. She pulled off her gray contractor shirt. Underneath was a black tank top, and covering her entire right arm from shoulder to wrist was the most intricate tattoo anyone on that range had ever seen. A dragon, black as midnight, scales so detailed they seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, and running along the dragon's body from shoulder to elbow were small marks, hash marks, perfectly uniform, obsessively precise. Someone started counting them quietly. 20, 40, 60. The count continued. 100, 150. Rivera stepped closer, his experienced eyes widening. 200, 300. The count went on and on. 400, 450. Knox's expression changed, from contempt to confusion to something that looked like dawning horror. 500. 500 hash marks. One for every confirmed kill. Meadow didn't acknowledge the silence that followed. She simply settled behind her rifle, her tattooed arm steady against the stock, and began engaging targets with a speed and precision that defied belief. Shot chamber acquire, shot chamber acquire. 500 yards, 700, 900, 1100, 1300, 1500. Stationary targets, moving targets, partially obscured targets, it didn't matter. Every shot found its mark. Every single one. The rifle became an extension of her body. The targets became inevitabilities. The distance between her and them collapsed into nothing but mathematics and muscle memory. When she cleared the weapon and stood, 1 minute and 47 seconds had elapsed. 12 targets, 12 shots, 12 perfect hits. The silence on the range was absolute. Casey Walsh was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" Meadow picked up her shirt, started to pull it back on, paused. "My name is Meadow Sterling," she said quietly, "though most of you probably know me by a different name, the one that shows up in classified after-action reports, the one that appears in mission debriefs you're not supposed to read." She pulled the shirt over her head, covered the dragon and its terrible accounting. "They called me Viper. I worked for a unit that doesn't have a name, conducting operations that never happened, in places you'll never hear about, against targets who simply disappeared." Knox found his voice. It came out rough, uncertain. "Viper, the Viper, the sniper who extracted that diplomat from Kandahar with a single shot at 1,600 yards through a sandstorm." "That was one mission," Meadow said softly. "The operator who took out the weapons dealer in Dubai from a yacht offshore, who eliminated the terrorist cell in Somalia with 5 shots in 7 seconds. Who?" "Those were some missions," Meadow interrupted gently. "There were others, many others, 500 others to be precise." She walked back to her equipment case, started breaking down her rifle with the same methodical care she'd shown during setup. "I'm here because the military is changing, evolving. They need a new generation of precision marksmen who can operate in urban environments, in complex terrain, against enemies who understand our tactics and have adapted to counter them." She looked up at the assembled SEALs. Her blue eyes no longer seemed soft or civilian. They seemed ancient, tired, like they'd seen things that couldn't be unseen. "I'm here to teach you how to survive what's coming, because the enemies you'll face won't be conventional, won't be predictable, won't give you the luxury of perfect conditions or unlimited time." Rivera stepped forward. "Ma'am, I apologize for." "Don't," Meadow said quietly. "Skepticism keeps people alive. Arrogance gets them killed. You were doing your job, protecting your team from potential incompetence." She finished packing her rifle, stood, faced them all. "But now you know who I am, what I've done. So let me ask you one more time. Are you ready to learn, or do you need more convincing?" The question hung in the California heat like a challenge and an invitation combined. Knox Blackwood, who had never backed down from anything in his life, who had built his reputation on being the hardest man in any room, stepped forward. And for the first time that morning, he spoke with respect. "We're ready, ma'am. Show us everything." Could they handle what she was about to teach them? The briefing room felt different now. The same concrete walls, the same harsh fluorescent lighting, the same uncomfortable metal chairs, but the energy had shifted completely. 40 Navy SEALs sat in absolute silence, waiting, listening, learning. Meadow stood at the front of the room, a tactical map spread across the table behind her. She'd pulled her hair back into a tighter bun. All business now. No more civilian contractor playing dress-up. This was Viper, the ghost who had killed 500 enemies without ever officially existing. "Let me tell you about my first mission," she began quietly, "because it taught me everything I'm going to teach you, and because it nearly killed me." She dimmed the lights, brought up a satellite image on the projector. "Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2018. A high-value target was meeting with local Taliban commanders in a compound approximately 2 clicks from friendlies. Standard extraction was impossible. Too many civilians, too much collateral risk. So they sent me. The image zoomed in, showed the compound, the streets, the impossible geometry of urban warfare. My hide site was here. She pointed to a building 1,300 meters from the target, third floor, partially destroyed, exposed on 2 sides. Wind conditions were unpredictable. Temperature was 108 degrees, and I had a 4-hour window before the target left the area. Knox leaned forward. 1,300 meters through urban terrain. That's impossible, Meadows smiled slightly. That's what my team lead said. Told me to wait for a better opportunity. But better opportunities don't always come. Sometimes you have one chance, one shot, and failure means the enemy lives to kill more people. She advanced to the next slide, showed wind patterns, elevation charts, temperature gradients. I spent 3 hours calculating, adjusting, recalculating. The physics were insane: bullet drop, wind drift, mirage effect from the heat, structural interference from buildings, every factor working against me. Lieutenant Pierce raised his hand. How did you compensate? I didn't compensate, Meadows said simply. I adapted. I watched the environment. I learned its rhythms. I waited for the moment when all the variables aligned, even for just a few seconds. She paused, let the weight of that sink in. When the shot presented itself, I had maybe 3 seconds. The target appeared in a second-floor window, partially obscured, moving, surrounded by civilians. One shot, one chance. If I missed, we'd lose him forever. If I hit wrong, innocent people would die. The room was absolutely silent. So I took the shot. She brought up the after-action report, heavily redacted, but clear enough. One round, 1,300 meters, through a window past 2 civilians, into the target's chest. He went down instantly, clean kill, no collateral damage. Mission complete. She turned to face them. But here's what the report doesn't tell you. Here's what no mission brief can capture. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I'd spent 3 hours in that hide site second-guessing every calculation, wondering if I'd gotten the wind wrong, if I'd miscalculated the distance, if I was about to kill innocent people because of my arrogance. Her voice dropped lower. That fear never goes away. After 500 confirmed kills, I still feel it before every shot. That moment of absolute certainty that I'm about to fail, that I'm not good enough, that everything I've learned and practiced and perfected will collapse when it matters most. She walked to the tactical map, pointed to specific locations. This is what I'm going to teach you. Not just the technical skills, not just the mathematics of long-range precision shooting, but how to function when your mind is screaming at you to quit, when your body is shutting down from exhaustion, when the pressure of other people's lives is crushing you with the weight of impossible responsibility. Casey Walsh spoke up. How do you deal with that pressure, ma'am? Meadow turned to her. Her expression softened slightly. You accept that you're going to be afraid, that you're going to doubt yourself, that you're going to question every decision, and then you shoot anyway, because people are counting on you, because the mission requires it, because walking away isn't an option. She advanced to the next slide, showed a training schedule that made several operators wince. Starting tomorrow, you're going to experience what I experienced. We're going to recreate combat conditions as closely as possible without actually putting you in harm's way. Long-distance shooting while exhausted, while stressed, while dealing with equipment failure and environmental chaos and time pressure that will make you question your sanity. Knox studied the schedule. This is aggressive, ma'am. Combat is aggressive, Sergeant. Combat doesn't care if you're tired, doesn't care if conditions aren't perfect, doesn't care if you need more time to prepare. Combat happens when it happens, and you either perform or you fail. She pulled up another image. This one showed a range setup unlike anything they'd seen before. This is where you'll train. Variable distance targets, moving platforms, environmental simulation that includes wind, rain, heat, cold, and low visibility. You'll shoot from prone, from kneeling, from standing, from unstable platforms, from moving vehicles, in daylight, in darkness, with night vision, without it. Lieutenant Pierce whistled low. That's comprehensive. That's reality, Meadow corrected. Elite snipers don't get to choose their conditions. They adapt to whatever they're given, or they die. She turned off the projector, brought the lights back up. Some of you are going to wash out of this course. Not because you're bad shooters, not because you lack dedication, but because you'll discover that technical skill alone isn't enough. That mental toughness matters more than physical strength. That humility is more valuable than confidence. She met each person's eyes in turn. But those of you who make it through will leave here with capabilities that most snipers spend decades trying to develop. You'll understand what it means to be truly elite, not just skilled, not just competent, but capable of the impossible. Rivera raised his hand. Ma'am, what's the washout rate for this course? Meadows' smile was sad. In the pilot program I ran last year, 87%. Out of 40 candidates, only 5 completed the full qualification. The number hit the room like a physical force. But those 5, she continued, are now operating at levels that most snipers dream about. They're the reason this program is being expanded. They're the proof that elite isn't born, it's forged, through pressure, through failure, through the relentless pursuit of excellence even when excellence seems impossible. She picked up her equipment bag, prepared to leave. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow morning, 0500, we begin your actual evaluation. Wear comfortable boots, bring water, and prepare yourselves mentally for the hardest 2 weeks of your lives. She paused at the door, looked back. One more thing. If any of you decide this isn't for you, there's no shame in that. Walking away from something that doesn't serve you is wisdom, not weakness. I'd rather have 5 committed students than 40 who are just going through the motions. Knox stood. Ma'am, I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're all in. The room murmured agreement. Meadow nodded slowly. Good. Then let's see if you can back up that commitment with performance. She left the room, her boots echoing in the hallway. Behind her, 40 elite operators sat in silence, processing, preparing, understanding for the first time that what they thought was excellence had been just the beginning. The dragon on her arm bore 500 marks. Tomorrow, they would begin to understand what each one represented. How far would she push them? 0500 came fast, too fast. The California dawn was still just a promise on the horizon when 40 Navy SEALs assembled on the range. They wore full combat gear, carried their weapons, looked ready for war. Meadow was already there, waiting. She'd set up 12 stations across the range, each one marked with a number, each one holding a different challenge. Good morning, she said simply. No warmth, no encouragement, just fact. Today you discover if you belong here. She walked to Station 1, gestured for them to follow. 800 yards, standard conditions. You have 1 shot to prove basic competency. Miss, and you're dismissed from the course immediately. The statement sent a ripple through the group. 1 shot, 1 chance, no do-overs. Knox went first, settled behind his rifle with the confidence of a man who'd done this thousands of times, controlled his breathing, made his calculations, took the shot. Hit. Relief flooded his face for just a moment. Adequate, Meadow said, not impressed, not dismissive, just observing. Next. One by one they took their shots, most hit, a few missed. Those few were escorted from the range immediately. No argument, no second chances, gone. By the time they reached Station 5, the group had shrunk from 40 to 34. Station 5, Meadow announced. 1,200 yards, elevated position, crosswind at 15 miles per hour. You'll take this shot after completing a 1-mile run with full gear. You have 3 minutes from the end of your run to engage the target. Start running. The course was brutal: sand, heat, weight. By the time they reached the firing line, most were breathing hard, hands shaking slightly, focus scattered. Lieutenant Pierce was one of the first to shoot. His round went wide, missed by nearly 2 feet. "Dismissed," Meadow said quietly. "Ma'am, I just need." "Dismissed, Lieutenant. You allowed physical stress to compromise your fundamentals. In combat, that gets people killed." Pierce stood there for a moment, disbelief written across his face. Then slowly, with dignity, he collected his equipment and walked off the range. The lesson was clear. This wasn't training where mistakes were learning opportunities. This was qualification, where failure meant removal. By Station 8, only 21 operators remained. "This is where it gets interesting," Meadow said. Her voice carried an edge now, not cruelty, but absolute unwillingness to accept anything less than perfection. "Station 8, 1,500 yards, moving target, low visibility due to dust simulation. You'll engage from a prone position while another operator creates ground vibration by running nearby. 1 shot. Begin." The conditions were insane. The dust made target acquisition nearly impossible. The vibration from the running operator disrupted weapon stability. The distance was at the absolute limit of most shooters' capabilities. One by one they failed. The target remained unhit. Operator after operator walked away, heads down, defeated. Casey Walsh approached the line. Meadow watched her carefully. Casey settled into position, waited, breathed. The running operator thundered past. The dust swirled. The target appeared for maybe 2 seconds through the chaos. Casey took the shot. Hit. Perfect center mass. Meadow nodded slightly. Good, next. By the time Station 8 was complete, only 11 operators remained. The rest had been sent home, back to their units, carrying the knowledge that elite was a harder standard than they'd imagined. "Station 9, Meadow said. "This is where we separate capability from potential." She brought them to a platform elevated 30 feet above the range. Unstable, swaying in the wind. Below, targets appeared at random intervals between 1,000 and 1,400 yards. "You'll take 3 shots from this platform. Engage targets as they appear. Movement, instability, uncertainty. This simulates shooting from a helicopter or unstable sniper hide. Begin." Knox went first. His first shot hit. His second missed. His third hit. 2 of 3, Meadow observed. "Borderline adequate. You advance but understand you're on the edge." The pattern continued. Some operators adapted to the instability, others couldn't. By the end of Station 9, only 7 remained. 7 from 40. Meadow gathered them together. They looked exhausted, humbled but still standing. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "You've proven basic capability under stress. Now we find out if you can truly excel." She led them to Station 10. What they saw there made several of them pause. It was a maze, concrete barriers, turn after turn, and at the end, barely visible through the structure, targets at varying distances. "This simulates urban combat," Meadow explained. "You'll navigate this maze while carrying full combat load. At random points, targets will appear. You'll have seconds to identify, acquire, and engage. Some targets are hostile, some are civilian. Hit a civilian, you're dismissed immediately." Rivera spoke up, his voice tight. "Ma'am, how are we supposed to differentiate in that time frame?" "The same way you differentiate in real combat: experience, intuition, training, and acceptance that you might make a mistake that costs innocent lives." She let that weight settle. "But that's the job. That's what we signed up for. Perfect decisions in imperfect circumstances." One by one, they entered the maze. Knox navigated carefully. hit 2 hostile targets, avoided 3 civilians, made it through. Santos went next, hit 1 hostile, accidentally engaged a civilian target, was immediately dismissed. By the end of the maze, 5 operators remained. 5 from 40. Meadow looked at them with something that might have been respect. You 5 have demonstrated capability beyond what most snipers achieve in their entire careers. You've adapted, survived, performed under conditions designed to break you. She paused. But we're not done. Station 11 is tomorrow, 0500. It's the hardest thing you'll ever face. And if you fail it, everything you've accomplished up to this point means nothing. Casey's voice was hoarse from the day's exertion. What's Station 11, ma'am? Meadows' smile was sad. Station 11 is where you face yourself, your doubts, your fears, your absolute certainty that you're not good enough, and you shoot anyway. She turned to leave, paused. Get food, get rest, get your minds right, because tomorrow I'm going to ask you to do something that feels impossible, and you're going to do it anyway. The 5 operators stood in the fading light, exhausted, uncertain, but still committed. Somewhere in the distance, targets waited. Tomorrow would tell if they were truly elite, or just highly skilled. Could they face their own limitations? Station 11 wasn't on the range. At 0500, Meadow led the 5 remaining operators to a different location entirely. A building on the edge of the base that looked abandoned. Windows dark. No activity, just empty concrete and shadows. This is where we test truth, she said quietly. Inside, the building had been converted into something resembling a real-world operation. Multiple floors, stairwells, rooms with varying visibility, and throughout, mannequins positioned at distances from 200 to 800 yards, some hostile, some civilian, some ambiguous. You'll move through this building as a 2-person team, Meadow explained. Your partner will handle close-quarters threats. You'll handle long-range threats. Communication will be difficult. Visibility will be compromised. And you'll have to make decisions in real time with incomplete information. She looked at each of them. This is as close to real combat as we can create without actually sending you into combat, which means the stress will be real. The pressure will be real, and your failures will feel very, very real. Knox and Rivera paired up first. They entered the building with weapons ready, moved through the ground floor with tactical precision. Then Knox spotted a target through a window on the 2nd floor, distant, partially obscured, maybe hostile, maybe not. I need more information, he called to Rivera. You don't have more information, Meadows' voice came through their comms. You have 3 seconds to decide, hostile or civilian, shoot or don't shoot. Knox's finger found the trigger, hesitated. 2 seconds. The target shifted, revealed an object in its hands, could be a weapon, could be a phone. 1 second. Knox made his choice, didn't shoot. The scenario ended, lights came on. The mannequin held a rifle, a hostile target. Knox's hesitation had just cost lives in a real scenario. Explain your decision, Meadow said calmly. Knox's jaw tightened. I wasn't certain, ma'am. I couldn't confirm hostile intent. In combat, certainty is a luxury. You had indicators, body position, location, context, but you let doubt override your training. She pulled up an analysis on a tablet, showed him all the factors he'd missed in his hesitation. This isn't about being trigger-happy. It's about trusting your training when your mind is screaming uncertainty. You made a choice based on fear of being wrong. That gets people killed too. Knox nodded slowly, understanding but clearly frustrated with himself. Casey and Petty Officer Rodriguez went next. Their scenario was different, harder. They moved through 3 floors before Casey spotted a target at 600 yards through a broken window. Hostile indicators were clear, but the shot was insanely difficult. Wind, movement, partial obstruction. Take the shot, Rodriguez urged. Casey settled into position, controlled her breathing, made her calculations. But something held her back. Not doubt about the target, doubt about her capability. 600 yards through difficult conditions. What if she missed? What if she hit wrong? What if her training wasn't enough? 5 seconds, Meadows' voice cut through the comms. Casey's finger touched the trigger. 4 seconds. She could see the variables: wind speed, bullet drop, temperature gradient. 3 seconds. All the mathematics were there, all the training, all the preparation. 2 seconds. But what if it wasn't enough? 1 second. She took the shot. Missed. The round went wide by inches. In a real scenario, the hostile would have returned fire, would have killed friendlies, because Casey had let fear compromise her fundamentals. The scenario ended. Casey stood slowly. Her face showed everything: disappointment, shame, the crushing weight of knowing she'd failed when it mattered. Meadow approached her quietly. "Talk to me," she said simply. Casey's voice was tight. "I second-guessed myself, ma'am. I had the shot, I knew the calculations, but I didn't trust them, I didn't trust myself." "Why?" The question hung there, simple, devastating. "Because," Casey struggled with the words, "because it felt too hard, because I've never made a shot like that under pressure, because I was afraid of failing." Meadow nodded slowly. "And because you were afraid, you guaranteed the failure you feared. That's the trap, Casey. The mind creates the very outcome it's trying to avoid." She pulled up Casey's shot data, showed her the calculations. "Your math was perfect. Your wind call was correct. Your position was solid. The only thing that compromised your shot was the hesitation, the mental delay between knowing what to do and trusting yourself to do it." Casey stared at the data. "How do I fix that?" "By accepting that fear is part of the process. That elite operators feel fear just like everyone else. The difference is they shoot through it. They trust their training even when their emotions are screaming otherwise." Meadow gestured back toward the building. "Run it again. Same scenario. This time when fear tells you to hesitate, shoot anyway." Casey re-entered the building, moved through the floors, found the target again. 600 yards, wind, movement, obstruction. All the same variables. But this time when fear rose up, she acknowledged it. "Yes, I'm afraid. Yes, this is hard. Yes, I might fail. And I'm shooting anyway." The round broke clean. Perfect calculation, perfect execution. The target went down. Meadows' voice came through the comms, quiet approval. "That's how it's done." The day continued. Each operator faced scenarios designed to expose their specific weaknesses. Knox learned to trust his instincts. Rodriguez learned to function under chaos. Rivera learned that experience didn't make you immune to doubt. By evening, all 5 had been broken down and built back up multiple times. They gathered in a briefing room, exhausted, humbled, changed. Meadow stood before them. "Today you face the hardest opponent you'll ever encounter. Not an enemy combatant, not difficult conditions, but yourself, your doubts, your fears, your absolute certainty that you're not capable of what's being asked." She looked at each of them. Elite operators aren't people without fear. They're people who function despite fear, who shoot through doubt, who trust their training when every instinct screams to hesitate. She pulled up one final slide. "Tomorrow is your final qualification. One shot, extreme distance, extreme conditions. Either you make it or you don't. There's no in between." Knox raised his hand. "What's the distance, ma'am?" Meadows' smile was slight. 1,600 yards, moving target, variable wind. You'll take the shot after a 3-mile run with full combat load. Your window will be approximately 5 seconds, and if you miss, you wash out of the program. The weight of it settled over the room. "But here's what I want you to understand. The shot isn't the real test. The real test is whether you trust yourself enough to take it, whether you can stand on that line knowing you might fail and shoot anyway. She gathered her materials. 0500, final qualification, everything you've learned, everything you've overcome. It all comes down to one moment, one decision, one shot. She paused at the door. And I believe each of you can make it. The 5 operators sat in silence after she left. Tomorrow would determine if they were right to believe her, or if believing wasn't enough. Could they make the impossible shot? The dawn came cold, unusual for California, but the cold felt appropriate. It matched the weight in every operator's chest. 5 of them stood on the range, out of 40, 5 who had survived the crucible, 5 who would now face the ultimate test. Meadow was already at the firing line, her dragon tattoo visible in the early light. 500 marks, 500 impossible shots, she'd made them all. Could they make just one? The target is there, she said, pointing downrange. 1,600 yards away, barely visible even with magnified optics, a target waited. It will move on a random pattern. You'll have approximately 5 seconds from first appearance to engagement. Wind is variable. Conditions are non-optimal, but conditions are never optimal. She looked at each of them. You'll run 3 miles, full combat load, then immediately take your position and engage when ready. No warm-up, no second chances, just training and trust. Knox went first. His massive frame seemed to eat up the distance, but 3 miles is 3 miles. By the time he returned, his breathing was labored, hands shaking slightly. He settled behind his rifle, waited for the target. It appeared, moved, 1,600 yards of pure mathematics and instinct. Knox made his calculations, adjusted for wind, led the target. Took the shot. The round flew true, crossed that impossible distance, found its mark. The target went down. Knox stood slowly, disbelief and pride warring on his face. "Congratulations, Sergeant," Meadow said quietly. "You're qualified." Rivera went next, then Rodriguez. Both made their shots. Both proved that training and trust could overcome doubt and distance. Casey was second to last. She ran her 3 miles with determined focus, returned to the line with controlled breathing, settled into position with mechanical precision. The target appeared. Casey saw it, calculated, adjusted. But as her finger touched the trigger, doubt whispered. What if you miss? What if all this training wasn't enough? What if you're not elite after all? She remembered Meadow's words, fear is part of the process, shoot through it. She took the shot. The round crossed 1,600 yards of space, fought wind and gravity and chaos. Found its target. Perfect hit. Casey stood slowly, tears in her eyes, not from sadness, from the release of pressure, from proving to herself that she was capable of the impossible. Meadow approached her, put a hand on her shoulder. "I knew you could do it," she said quietly. "How?" Casey's voice was rough. "Because you learned the most important lesson. That capability isn't the absence of fear. It's the courage to act despite it." The final operator, a quiet SEAL named Martinez, took his run, returned, settled. The target appeared. He engaged. His round flew true. 5 operators, 5 impossible shots, 5 successes. Meadow gathered them together. The California sun was higher now, warming the day, burning away the morning cold. "You 5 have accomplished something remarkable," she said. "Not because you made difficult shots, but because you overcame the limitations you placed on yourselves. You learned to trust your training even when trust felt impossible." She looked at each of them. "You're now qualified as elite precision marksmen, but understand that this is just the beginning. The real test comes when you're deployed, when lives depend on you, when the shot you have to make is even harder than this one." Knox spoke for the group. "We're ready, ma'am." Meadows smiled. "I believe you are, but remember this. Being elite isn't about never feeling fear. It's about shooting through it. It's not about being perfect. It's about being reliable when perfection is impossible." She pulled up her sleeve, showed them the dragon, the 500 marks. "Each of these represents a moment when I had to choose. Trust my training or give in to doubt. Make the hard shot or walk away. Every single time I chose to shoot, not because I was certain I'd succeed, but because failure to act was worse than the risk of failure itself." She covered the tattoo again. "You five now carry that same responsibility when you're downrange, when the pressure is crushing, when every instinct screams to hesitate. Remember this moment. Remember that you made the impossible shot, and trust that you can do it again." The 5 operators stood taller, changed, forged through pressure into something harder than they'd been. "Dismissed," Meadow said quietly. "Go be elite." They walked off the range, each carrying the knowledge that they'd proven something to themselves that could never be taken away. Meadow stayed behind, alone with the range in her thoughts. She looked down at her arm, at the dragon, at the marks. 500 moments when she'd chosen courage over comfort, action over hesitation, trust over doubt. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that those 5 operators would add their own marks to their own stories, would face their own impossible shots, would choose to shoot when shooting felt impossible. Because that's what elite meant. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to act despite it. The California sun climbed higher. The range grew quiet. The targets waited for the next generation of warriors to test themselves against impossible standards. And Meadow Sterling, the ghost who had killed 500 enemies, who had made shots that defied belief, who had proven that size and strength mattered less than skill and determination, walked back toward the base. Her work here was done. But somewhere, new challenges waited. New operators to train. New impossible shots to make. Because in the end, dignity didn't require recognition. It didn't need validation. It simply acted when action was required. Sometimes quietly, sometimes invisibly, but always with the kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you're capable of. Even when the world doubts you, even when the shot seems impossible, even when fear whispers that you should walk away. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.